From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Burke, and in every Blue Sky episode, we'll be speaking to leaders, researchers, and thinkers whose stories and insights will remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. The way it usually works on this podcast is that I, as the host, go out and find my guests. In this case, my guest, Kristine Michie, found me. Or rather, it was her husband, who's a fan of Guy Kawasaki's podcast, who heard me there and recommended that Christy reach out for me to be a guest on her show. I was honored to be on Kristine's PlayFull podcast in March of this year, and pleased to be the recipient of delicious pints of ice cream that she sends to all of her guests. More on that later. And after speaking with her, I knew Kristine would also be a great fit for Blue Sky. Kristine Michie is founder of Impactfull Inc., creator of Provocative Joy Retreats, Changemaker Camp, and host of the PlayFull podcast, bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world. Her firm reinvents change sector strategies with fresh approaches, including board development and delight, balance and joy meeting facilitation, and better giving coaching for funder collectives. A published author, panelist, and speaker, Kristine brings joy to changemakers worldwide. I hope you enjoy this Blue Sky conversation with Kristine Michie as much as I did. Kristine Michie, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast.
No, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation and this chance to be with your smiling face.
There you go. Well, it's a pleasure to speak with you again. I was happy to be a guest on your PlayFull podcast. We'll talk some more about that. Not my appearance, but the podcast. I noticed something on one of your bios where you said, this is how you described yourself: 30 years of speaking out, stirring it up, and writing it down. So I'd like to start by going through those things. So, and sort of what makes you tick. So let's start with stirring it up. Tell me about that and where does that come from?
Wow. Thank you. I can't remember how long ago I wrote that, but I haven't heard it in a while and it sounds good. So stirring it up, Bill, I walked on my first political campaign door to door when I was 4 years old.
Come on.
I thought it was when I was 8. I thought it was 1972, George McGovern running in that fateful election for those of us old enough to remember. And then my mom told me, actually, it was 4 years earlier when Tom Bradley was running for mayor of Los Angeles for the first time.
Wow.
He ran again later successfully.
Yeah.
And my family story is to be involved.
Right.
And so stirring it up, sometimes that means stirring things up. That's basically maybe a general sense that if things aren't, now, of course, this is all subjective,
sure,
but if things aren't maybe as fair as they could be in say, for example, my opinion, in a social justice framing, not just like, oh, I'm disappointed, but like, oh, what can I do? So there's some stirring it up in getting involved. So I would say that's sort of the stirring it up origin story.
Making good trouble, as John Lewis would say.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. And then writing it down. So you started out your career as a journalist.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about that and then how it evolved into what you're doing now?
Yeah. Bill, I as a kid, when I was 7, so you get the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said U.S. Senator from California. I didn't really know like all the steps between now and then. I think I thought I'd probably like go to law school and then I would, somehow get into lower level politics and move up. And I always knew, though, that the main point was whatever I did, I wanted to make a difference.
Yep.
So I ended up in college. I went to UCLA undergrad, studied poli-sci, went to DC and did an internship, and got discouraged that it felt like it was just all about fundraising. I felt like I had done all this research on the issues, and I worked for a congressman whose ideas aligned with mine and his vision for the world. And I just felt like all we were doing was like writing constituent fundraising letters and throwing, receptions because money really does, make that engine move. So I
Yep.
came back to UCLA and I thought, well, what else can I do that, because I not, I guess I hadn't totally shut the door on politics, but I'm like, what else could I do versus this law school track that I thought I was on?
Right.
And I was like, well, I'm a good writer, so maybe what can I do with that? And at UCLA at the time, there was only a communications program. There wasn't journalism because it was more of a liberal arts kind of versus a more practical trade kind of approach.
Right.
And so I kept with my same major, but then I started volunteering and doing internships in spaces where I could do some writing and editing, et cetera. Ended up going to Medill at Northwestern to get my master's afterwards. And I remember, Bill, my parents had offered to, and I was, so lucky to be supported by them in these choices. They
Yes.
said, okay, they would support me with 1 year of graduate school. And at the time, Medill had a 1 year master's program.
Perfect.
So, and my said, and I also had said to them, you don't need a master's to be a journalist. You just go get a job and start. I mean, you know the field well. But if I
Right.
could get to one of the top schools, it felt like that would be advantageous and worth the while.
Sure. Of
So
course.
did that. And then, but then practicality, I know you can relate that different times in your life, things are just like, what's the next practical thing to do? So my first couple jobs out of grad school were in the trade publishing field. I think we had talked about that before. I was living in
Yeah.
Chicago,
Yeah.
of course, where Northwestern is. And so I worked for an advertising magazine, and then I ended up working for an automotive magazine. So suddenly I'm like 27. I moved back out to California. I'm the West Coast bureau chief for something called Automotive News, which is an esteemed publication in the auto
That's a
industry.
big one. That's
Yeah.
not just any other auto magazine. That's a big one.
But Bill, I didn't care about it at all. And
Yeah.
and if if you're around car people, car guys in
Oh yeah.
particular,
That's a thing. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I sort of stood out, but I was taking it because it's a business publication. So I was taking it as a really good skills building job. And I got to
Sure.
fly around the world and meet lots of people and conduct interviews and all of that. But I'm sitting one day in Dallas, Texas at the National Automobile Dealers Association annual meeting,
Yep.
a workshop about maximizing profits in your service department. And I'm thinking, what in the world am I doing here? I got to find a
Yes.
way to bring my vocation and avocation together. I was volunteering on a bunch of political campaigns at the time and nonprofit organizations. I went back to those. I'm like, what are the jobs? And so I transitioned into grant writing using
Ah.
that primary skill, and had to convince my first boss that being an automotive journalist and a fundraiser were the same thing, which in fact,
Yes.
I think they're very similar because you have to have a lot of gumption. You have to be able to pick up the phone, establish rapport, and ask for something, either information as a journalist or money as a fundraiser. And that was 1993. So
Wow.
many years ago. And so then I built the rest
Yeah.
of my career in the nonprofit and philanthropic sector.
Amazing. And so did you very quickly, as you tell your story, and that's why I ask people to tell their stories, I can feel and hear this sort of looking for the next thing, but always wanting to make an impact, make the world better, which I will always say is part of being optimistic. It doesn't just happen. You have to go out and make an impact. So you're doing that. So you move from automotive news to philanthropy. Did it feel right away, and that sort of set you off on your current path?
Oh, it did. Absolutely. I had the privilege of getting to work my first job. The first boss I just told you about that I had to convince, she actually had a consulting practice. And so she had a bunch of different clients. So I got some immediate exposure to several different kinds of issue areas and solutions. And as we call it in our field, theories of change. And so it was
Yes.
really satisfying right from the beginning. And Bill, one of the first assignments I got back there in 1993 was working for an organization that still exists today, and I'm on its board. It's called Students Run LA. They train
Okay.
inner city kids in Los Angeles and LA Unified to run the LA Marathon. And I'm
Oh,
also a
wow.
runner, and so the time I was a runner then too. And this consulting, my boss, this consultant, she's like, "Oh, you're gonna love this. This is great. This is kids and running. It's all you love all this stuff."
Yeah.
And just to plug them, 70,000 kids have been through the program in the last 35 years with 98% completion rate of the marathon. And then guess
Oh my
what?
gosh.
98% like post-secondary pursuits of significance, right? Because what you learn running a marathon and train for a marathon is significant and it translates. So yeah,
Absolutely.
Bill, it felt right. I mean, that was really bullseye for me, but then in lots of other ways, all the other work and being able to, Bill, when I wanted to get out of that, what I realized, and I, certainly I could have gone into just more mainstream journalism, and I thought about
Sure.
that. But honestly, I didn't want to write both sides of the story. And I knew
Yeah,
as a
right.
journalist, I would need to. I thought, you know what? I want to write marketing copy for change. And so that's where I
Right.
knew if I went into this sector, I didn't have to somebody else can talk about the other side of the issue. I'm just going to put forward this problem, this solution, and see if we can all come together to make this change.
Kristine Michie is not a recent convert to a life of advocacy, but rather participated in her first political campaign when she was at the ripe old age of 4. But as a young adult, government work in Washington, D.C. felt more like full-time fundraising, and Kristine's promising career in journalism also left her unfulfilled, as covering the automotive industry didn't go as far as she wanted in helping her make a difference. Instead, her interest in running led her to Students Run LA, a remarkable organization that's helped 70,000 young people train for and run in the Los Angeles Marathon. Her efforts there only increased her desire to continue to work very directly on efforts to make change in the world for the better. For more on that, let's get back to our conversation. So today, let's bring it up to today. You are focusing on joy. You have the PlayFull with 2 L's podcast. You do retreats. So walk us through, first of all, how did you land on this sort of joy, playful, and bringing that to organizations of all places?
So, I think, Bill, some of it, or maybe a lot of it, is just natural, right? I am naturally optimistic. I'm
Yep.
naturally positive. I've also had a lot of privilege and life experience that has buoyed that and grown that.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
so there's that. I think I sometimes will say I was born on the right side of the bed, waking up on the right side. But I kind of I've had that.
Yeah.
And then more specifically, I was working on a book called Change the World and Still Get a Good Night's Sleep. That
Yep.
was during early COVID, after Black Lives Matter summer. So kind of
Yes.
that, as we turned the corner into 2021, January 6th, all of that was going on.
Yeah.
And I signed up for I've written a book before, so I was confident that I could do that. And I had 3 chapters and a marketing plan. And I even had, through a colleague, an opportunity to present it all to some agents. And I get this pre-sale notice for a book by a wonderful author, Tricia Hersey, who is a self-proclaimed nap bishop. And she has something
Ooh.
called the Nap Ministry. And she really focuses on
Oh,
literally napping, resting. You definitely would
I could be a nap cardinal. I'm very pro nap, but go ahead.
Okay. So Tricia's book, which is right here on my shelf, called Rest is Resistance, was coming out. And I got a pre-sale notice for that. And I was reading over it, and I was reading a bit of her foreword, and she was talking about Black women in rest and how systemically, historically, forever, Black women have not been allowed to rest in America.
Right.
And so I started thinking about my own story that I was writing, and the fact that, honestly, Bill, it felt a little indulgent. Like, if I'm not resting, there's no systems keeping me from resting. I just, could have a little more life balance. So it just felt, given the moment we were in, with everything going on in the world, and the justice that I want to be a part of promoting and being involved in, growing, that wasn't my story to tell at that time. So I set
Interesting.
all that work aside, just kind of lovingly put it on a little side table, and thought, I wonder what will come next. And then my daughter said to me, well, Mom, you're not really that good at resting anyways, which is true. So we kind of thought, maybe I can't write that book. And play just came to me as a form of rest that is actually my most natural way, my most natural offering. Yeah. And I started traveling again as we're coming out of COVID. And I was trying to get people to meet me for the old traveling salesman thing, okay, I'm going to be in town. You want to get together for lunch?
Yeah.
And nobody was leaving their houses. I would fly to Manhattan and people wouldn't leave the Bronx, to come meet me.
Right. Crazy time.
So I started adding into my email, want to meet for, coffee, lunch, or ... a scoop of gelato. And I started getting people to they're like, oh, well, that sounds fun. So just a bunch of things started layering. And my firm is called Impactfull, one word with 2 L's. And all of a sudden, man, there is a treasure trove of words that end with FUL that you can just throw another L on, and I can
Yeah, right, right.
grab it from my brand. And
Yeah,
so Playful came to mind as that. And I'll tell you, in all the work I do, I'll give you an example at my consulting practice, Impactfull. I do what's called board development. So that's basically working with
yes,
a philanthropy or a nonprofit organization and helping them improve their board, grow it,
yes,
change it, reinvigorate it, or maybe build a first time board. But my practice is called board development and delight. So I just
yeah,
add that in there because why wouldn't it be delightful? And if we're kind of willing to accept less than that, we're missing the opportunity to do the work better. So I'm always trying to add in my retreat practice is called provocative joy. And so I'm trying to like
yes,
what's the tension in there between like how can joy be provocative as we're trying to do good work. And as you know, we eat ice cream on the podcast where the
yes.
subtitle is bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world. And we you and I had that experience together, and all the other guests
Totally.
as well.
I had an amazing peanut butter chocolate combo thing. There is something I will say, there's something about gelato slash ice cream, like the most joyful food ever, at least in my view. So I've served on several nonprofit boards. I've chaired a few, and it's interesting because, by definition, generally these are, nonprofits are trying to do good things in the world, and it's a mission you can feel good about. But there's something about sitting around a boardroom sometimes that really brings it down and somber and serious. And let's look at the numbers. And I just my personality, I usually just can't handle that. So I'll at least drop in a few bad, dad jokes or something just to lighten the mood. And someone said, and I won't get it quite right, but that nothing brings a group together better than shared laughter.
Mm.
And and I really believe that. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts sort of on that generally. And I imagine sometimes when you're approaching an organization, they say, "Well, joy, like what is it? This is business. What does that have to do with this?" So
Right.
how do you answer that?
Well, it does seem that we're in, maybe it's an obvious kind of corollary. We're in a moment right now where the kind of the pain and the angst is
Yeah.
high and understood. I am seeing more and more curiosity about how joy, love, play can counter that and can coexist and should, especially for those trying to do this hard work. Um,
Yep.
I was listening to one of your recent episodes. You admitted to all of us that you had had a little lull, you'd had a little
It
dip
happened.
in your
It happened.
optimism,
It happened.
and I had, you know, I have to. I've taken all the news off of all my. I mean, I'm not getting any news. Maybe occasional peek, listening on BBC a little bit, and then I get most of my news from LinkedIn, where I'm seeing what my colleagues are doing on the front lines, and I'm hearing their reports and I'm supporting those. Um, and so I've wondered, Bill, if okay, is this every once in a while, like, is this a little indulgent? Like, is this whole like play and joy and ice cream thing in this moment? Am
Yeah.
I being irresponsible perhaps by and I got to tell you, here's my buying signals on joy and play is that the people I was just in Oxford at the Skull World Forum with 1,500
Yes.
change makers and then another 2,000 at the sidebar, another thing called Marmalade. So there's about 5,000 people in town from 100 countries
Wow.
walking along these cobblestone streets, going in and out of these ancient buildings and talking about change, and that I had an ice cream party on Friday afternoon. It lasted 2.5 hours. Like
Oh my gosh.
people are
Did you have enough
really
ice cream?
well. I was at an ice cream shop, so
Oh, good,
they
good,
had
good,
enough.
good.
They had
Okay,
enough.
it's
Yeah,
good for
but
them.
there's
Good.
a and I've been hosting folks on the podcast to come back for group episodes. And I just dropped them. We did one on January 6th. We did one, before and after the election. We're trying to pick, we did one coming, we'll do one coming up on the 100th day of the administration. And man, these people are busy and they're in the crux and crucible work. And they're
Yeah.
showing up for this. They would
Yeah.
like their 45 minutes of community, 45 minutes to see their colleagues and comrades that are doing the same work. Um,
Yep.
so I'm finding it, I am getting the question, what about this joy thing? But it doesn't
Yes.
take long for me to be able to point out to them, to whoever might be curious or skeptical, um, have they personally found that they're needing to create kind of pressure valve relief, so they can keep doing the work? And could they think and could they imagine bringing that to their organization or their board would bring
Yes.
bring equal value and create much more effectiveness?
I You're preaching to the choir. I'm finding something very similar. I just had breakfast with a friend this morning, and he was lamenting things that are going on in the world that he's struggling with, like many are. And he's like, "Please keep doing what you're doing." Like, there are people who are just like, we're counting on you. And as I tell people, look, I think it's great to stay informed. I think it's great to know what's going on. Where it's a democracy, you got to be an informed citizen, but you don't have to obsess about it.
Yeah.
And when you get together with other people, you got to have some fun and you got to have some joy. And I just believe when people are having a good time and enjoying each other's company, they also do better work.
Absolutely.
I think there's this work play divide that a lot of us have that's arbitrary and not super helpful.
Yeah.
Is that something that makes sense to you?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm actually working a series right now that I'm doing on the podcast called Just Transition, which is that term is used regarding specifically the economic just in the economic justice space. And it's talking about like what are the accepted really foundational, almost like fish in water kind of stuff that we don't realize about, for example, how we've separated work and play have to be two different things.
Yeah.
That's a construct. We can deconstruct that,
Right.
in a moment and in a conversation. Similarly about like, what counts as what does productivity look like?
Yeah.
Listen to this, Bill. I had a guest last week from Lift Economy, and she said, Kristine, nothing lowers the GDP like a potluck. And in the minute I heard lower the GDP, I thought, oh no, right? Because I've been taught that
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
problem. But she's
Right.
pointing out the productivity that is
Yes.
measured in the GDP versus the community building that can happen at a potluck is a measure of
Right.
its own and should be counted and could be as important as the other.
Yes. Someone will remember in the audience will remember which country this is, but there's a country where at least for a while they're measuring GDH, which was gross domestic happiness.
Happiness.
And they would, when they were doing surveys and that sort of thing, that was one of the things on their metric. Oh, it was a small country. I want to say it's in Asia. I'll look it up. And look it up, I did. The country I was trying to remember is Bhutan. And indeed, gross national happiness was conceptualized by the fourth king of Bhutan, Jigme Singye Wangchuk, in 1972. And in 2008, the Gross National Happiness Index was instituted as the goal of the government of Bhutan in that country's constitution. Who knew you'd get a quick Bhutan history tidbit on this week's Blue Sky podcast? And to my listeners, I say, you're welcome. Back to Kristine. I agree with her philosophy about play and work, and that it is indeed helpful to try to break down the notion that there should be a big, bright line between work and play. I'm also a passionate defender and fan of both naps and ice cream. Big time. And it was interesting to hear her mention potlucks, as both Pete Davis and Sam Pressler on past episodes have discussed the power of this type of gathering to bring people together. And Kristine will speak more about this in this next segment of our Blue Sky conversation.
I think you and all the listeners can remember it early COVID when we were having these like virtual happy hours and they were really lame. Like
so awkward. Just so awkward.
And you get the impetus and the idea was, nice. That's I'm sorry, but it was just super. And then I did one, and I got to do a couple where there was like, a box would arrive with some ingredients. We would do like a virtual cooking class together all at the same time. And so people were kind of finding their way. Now, what we found is even obviously after COVID is that there's a lot of ways we can stay in touch with each other when we don't necessarily have to hop on a plane and we can do stuff virtually. I think there are there's a group called Justice Funders Network that I do some work with, and they have mastered the virtual presentation and virtual facilitation. Their tools they use, and I'm really inspired by it. So I want to learn more from them about how they're doing it, because I've attended some of their courses and some of their meetings, and I have had a really good time. And so I'd love to learn how to do that more and better.
Yeah. And, and there's so many arguments pro and con virtual work. And obviously for a lot of people, just taking the commute out of the picture makes them much happier and more productive. I remember during the pandemic, I was chairing a very large nonprofit board, and to be courteous, everyone would mute their Zoom. And I would say something I thought was mildly funny. and I can't hear any laughter. And you know what I mean? And it's just like, I'm dying here. I have no idea if I just totally laid an egg, you know, click that clap thing if you thought that was funny. But yeah, it's just not the same. So tell me about your offsites and retreats. How do those work? I can picture you consulting and working with a board. What's it like if I go to one of your offsites or camps or these things you describe?
Yeah, so they are, if you had to like plot out moments spent and tally it up, there would be more moments spent in what would look like play, what would look like fun, with the eye towards, as my daughter likes to call it, sneaky purpose, team
Yes, right.
building, culture building. As an example, here's a favorite. So picture this, you walk in and not only do you see, but you hear, now you're going to like this, you hear the sound of typewriters, actual manual typewriters.
Yeah.
So I do Impact Haiku, where we get vintage typewriters brought in, but they're on good working condition. And
Yes.
and I have strips of haiku text, 5 and 7 syllables. You pick one, and you have to find somebody with. If I've got a 5, I got to find you. If you have a 7, we go to the typewriter
Oh,
together. We type up the first 2 lines, and then we write the rest. We write the third line, of course, and then a couple other stanzas. So there's, what's just happened there. We've had a bit of an icebreaker. We're working together on something, and then we're
totally.
creating, and then we share out. And so then also the evocative nature of this poetry, which will usually be thematic to whatever we've come together to work on or the issue area that these folks are working on.
And surely there's laughter in the
Oh,
room, or
and especially
just
if there's people under 40 and maybe even a little older, but people, they've never seen a typewriter or touched a
oh yeah,
typewriter.
what is that?
Right. So there's all that. And you kind of have to staff. It's good to have a typewriter kind of expert around. And I send White out in advance, as part of the shepherding to like say, this is, if you don't know what to do this, come bring it with you and we'll show you what to do when you get to the retreat.
Do they even still make whiteout?
They do. They do. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That was like everyone had to have a little thing of whiteout.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, you're
It was,
taking me
it was
back.
magical. So there's an example. So there's definitely, and like, I'll give you another example. I just at school last week, we were doing I co-facilitated with a great friend of mine, Ada Williams Prince, a session on intergenerational wisdom as a way to
Mm,
navigate a world in turmoil. And so we were
okay.
really emphasizing that we wanted people of all ages, to come. And then when they got there, we were going to not talk about age. We were going to actually lean into age because of our different ages, we would be able to bring different things to the conversation. So as
Yes.
folks walked in, they grabbed a sticky that showed which decade they were in, and they could put it on their
I like
shirt or put it
that.
on their forehead or whatever. And but it was
Yeah, yeah.
visible. And
Yes.
then we organized into the issue areas that we were going to discuss, climate change, et cetera. And said, so pick your issue area, but look around and make sure you've got all the stickies. Make sure you've got a good representation. And Bill, I had them write the year they were born on a big post-it on the wall when they came in. So we ended up with the youngest person was born in 2002, and the
Oh,
oldest person was born in 1962. So we had, a 40-year range of
wow.
people. And
Yeah.
then we had these mixed conversations. And our
Love that.
icebreaker was to talk about what you would bring to a potluck or a cookout if you were having a community dinner. And so people stood up and said the dish. And guess what? There was ancestral stories that
Oh,
came up from the dish they brought. There were cultural, there were geographic. And so we got to know each other in that way. And then I said, close your eyes and let's imagine all that food was really in the center of this table. What would it smell like in here? What would it look like?
wow.
Imagine the
Cool.
colors and the cutlery and the napkins, and just trying to get our senses activated so we could do imagination work. And I'll just got to tell you one more thing. So
Yeah, yeah.
I asked them to. We were saying these are problems that many consider perhaps intractable, right? Each of
Yes.
these issues needs a big breakthrough. So go into your groups and work on a big breakthrough and then talk about how it came to pass. So on one example was the economic justice group came back and they said, we want to describe to you a world where there's a poverty museum because there is no more poverty. So it has to be,
Ah,
you have to tell people how it used to
yeah.
be when it
Yeah, yeah.
wasn't fair and everyone didn't take care of each other and themselves.
Right, right.
The group that was working on migration and forced displacement came back and talked about a world where there were no passports, no visas, and no borders. And you could teleport. If you wanted to go somewhere, you could just teleport to it. So
Yes.
like this idea that like imagine, like I know you talk about imagination on the
Yeah.
podcast a lot. Like let's not limit ourselves to solving the current problems with the tools we think that are in front of us, right?
Yes.
And so my retreats and the camps and all of this are trying to, again, because it's all with these change makers and problem solvers around the room. Let's make sure we're bringing in, by sharing with each other and pulling out of our own spirit and psyche, the unimaginable, because all you have to do is start imagining it.
Right. Fascinating. So you've made me think of something else with the years of birth. There's a lot of discussion, Gen Y, Gen X,
Yeah.
boomers, all that. Do you see in your field, do you see by generation a different receptivity to what you're doing? Now, some older folks like me might say, "Oh, these young people, they don't know a hard day's work," or blah, blah, right? And then when you do an exercise like that, do you see much, or do the walls start breaking down as soon as you start having fun? Or do you have any reflection on that?
Here's just I haven't thought about that before, and now I will be thinking about it. But my first blush reaction is the bookend groups, and I would call myself on one of those books. So I'm in the 60 plus group, and the kind of 30 and under group seem to be really receptive.
Yeah.
The young ones probably kind of understandably, and then I think the older
Yeah.
ones, I think we're like, we don't have much time left to
Yeah.
help make our contribution to this change. Maybe we need some new tools. Let's us try
Right.
some things. And
Right.
there's also wisdom can also bring a little bit more perspective, where you can allow in a little bit of joy and play and rest. And so I don't mean to throw shade on the 40s and 50-year-olds. I think they're probably, God, I wonder if they're feeling the most responsibility, because they're more in the thick of it. They've got more working and living years ahead. Plus they're pretty familiar with how kind of rough and tough some of these issues are.
Yes.
But generally, to the earlier comment, though, I'm generally finding receptivity to this as hey, why don't we try it? This other stuff seems to be either not working or stuck.
First off, my apologies for the whiteout digression, but Kristine's reference to that magical product brought me way back. Listeners below the age of 50 may not have ever heard of it, but trust me, whiteout used to be standard issue for anyone who ever wrote anything on a typewriter. And as a form of team building or ice-breaking, randomly pairing authors for an impact haiku is an amazing idea, as is visualizing a better future and imagining things like poverty museums. So many great things that we take for granted today could only be imagined not very long ago. So who knows where this kind of optimistic thinking might take us. Now back to our final segment with Blue Sky guest Kristine Michie and a discussion of her podcast. Let's talk about the PlayFull podcast. When did you start? What made you go into podcasting? And let's start there, and then I'll have some more questions for you.
Yeah. Oh boy. So I told you about the book that I had been working on that I set aside, and honestly, and like I said, I lucked out. I wrote a book 20 years ago, and St. Martin's Press published it, and I had a great first author experience. I didn't make any money or anything like that. But it wasn't about that. It was about getting a story out into the world. And, in some ways it's gotten easier because you can self-publish. And so, certainly that was an option, but I kind of was a little hung up, and I wanted to get another New York publisher. Right. So the idea of the book was my first thought about what to bring back out into the world. But, starting a podcast is a lot easier than getting a book published, even if you publish it yourself. Sure. So in the platform, clearly, podcasting had grown in, popularity, and I was more familiar with it. And I guess it was so funny. Sometimes you'll hear this kind of joke, "Oh, you got a podcast too?" Everybody's got a podcast, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I think that what I thought of, I've got my, history, my experience as a journalist. So I'm a curious person I think I ask good questions, and I'm good at prepping. I have now a 30-year network that I've grown of people doing this work. And I love, more than anything, being in conversation. So it just felt really natural. And I remember I was actually I can track where I was when I kind of first said it out loud because I was visiting my son. I think I mentioned to you, he's a TV journalist in Louisville,
Yes.
Kentucky. I was going
Yes.
to visit him. He just moved there for his job. And we were at breakfast and I think I said, I think I'm gonna do a podcast. And he's like, "Oh, cool, mom." And so we leave where we were having breakfast and we go into this little gift shop place where we were, walking along the street. And he says to the gal behind the, "Oh, my mom's doing a podcast." And she goes, "Oh, what's it called or what is it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I didn't have my pitch. I didn't have my thing.
Yeah,
I didn't
right.
know what to say. It was gonna be
Too
something
soon,
about
too soon.
people trying to make the world a better place and helping them out." And so then, he's like, "Mom, you gotta really tighten that up." And so,
Yeah.
so then that was the fall of 22. And then I launched it at South by Southwest in March of 23. So just short, in that time, I kind of got the idea together and started thinking about how I would launch and came up with the ice cream idea and
Yeah.
adding that in. Like I told you, I had
Love
started
it.
doing that kind of to get business meetings, luring people with ice cream.
Yeah. Hey, whatever
So
it
then, yeah,
takes.
so it was 2 years ago, I think similar to yours, March
Same
of
month.
23.
Same month, March of 23, the year that changed podcasting forever. So,
Yes.
so when you look at one of the things, everything you mentioned are things that I enjoy about this work. I love doing the research. I enjoy speaking with people, learning about things I didn't know much about before. And I love looking for and finding these people that I didn't already know. So you mentioned a network of 30 years, but surely like someone like me, people you haven't met before. Tell me like who you're looking for. How do you find that? What are the range of sort of qualities or experience that you look for to bring onto your show?
Yeah. Oh, it is so fun. You're right. And actually, probably only of the 100 guests so far, less than 10 have I known more than 10 years.
Yeah, right.
There's only a few people
Yep.
that I've really known a long
Yep.
time. So I am primarily inviting on people that are full-time working in what I call the social sector or the change sector. So they may
Yep.
be, and they're probably either most likely a funder, so a philanthropist, a full-time
Yes.
philanthropist, or they might be a family foundation or an individual philanthropist, but they're very involved as a philanthropist, or they're a
Yes.
full-time staff person at a nonprofit organization, usually in the the CEO or another leadership position. So,
Okay.
and I think primarily my audience as well is people that are working in the change sector as it expands. And you know how hard it is to track who's actually listening. But I think
Yeah.
as it's expanding, just people of goodwill who are
Yes.
volunteering or trying to make a difference in their community would find it and do find it inspiring and I would say comforting to hear about the people that are doing this work full time and the big issues they're
Yes.
taking on and what they're putting into it. I have really had where my network has been helpful is I have rarely been more than one person away from the person I want to try and invite on.
Right.
Now we have a fun
Yes.
story because I
Yeah,
heard
that was
you
crazy.
on
Yeah.
Guy Kawasaki's podcast. Actually, my
Yeah.
husband heard you and came home and said, "You got to
Right.
listen and you got to get Bill."
Crazy. Right. Crazy. And I to this day, I'm not really sure how Guy found me. I mean, it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
But I think, and I'd love to hear your reflection on this. What I tell people is not only is it the fun part finding people, it's also not that hard.
Mhm.
And I like repeating that back because what it means to me is that it's not hard to find people doing things that will make the world better. It's not hard finding people who, despite everything that goes on in the world, are working hard and making a difference. They're everywhere. They just don't make headlines. Has that been your experience as well?
Oh, yes, please. Thank you so much. That reminds me of I think it was Neil Ford in your interview
Yeah,
with him.
he's
When
great.
I was
Yeah.
like listening to that, I was like, that's my saying. I always say that. I said, there's more good people than bad.
It's not even
And
close.
right. And then I add, and I just want to meet as many of them as I can. Like that's like I'm in the business meeting as many, and just like you, as many of those good people as
Right.
possible. And absolutely, they are in abundance. And I am, and then you're probably finding this too. One leads to another, especially if
Yeah.
I'm working in like right now in this economic justice series I've been on. I'm in the middle of we're in the recording. They're like, oh, you got to talk to so and so, and that turns
Yeah.
out to be a great recommendation. Yeah, I mean, just and even to tell you, just to you have been in Oxford, England, with 5,000 people
Yeah.
from 100 plus countries. And each of them certainly represented, 20 to 200 other people that weren't able to make, or 2,000 who weren't able to make
Yes.
that trip. So I think absolutely. And Bill, when we were talking earlier about, is this the right thing to be doing at this time?
Yeah.
Thinking about what other things could you and I be doing, right, to help, right?
Right.
I think we're right. We're right on it. I think this is, our contribution. And if I can't remember if I shared with you when we talked another time, that I got to walk part of the Camino de Santiago last fall.
Amazing.
And, as I did walking that ancient path, thinking about all the epics that had passed, and all the
Sure.
kings and tyrants and villains and heroes and martyrs and community builders, like all the people and, here we are for this 100-ish years, each of us as a part of, I don't know how long an epic lasts, but say it lasts, a bunch of our kind of overlapping lifetimes.
Sure.
So like while I'm here, what role am I going to play in this epic? And I think the contribution of joy and play, to lift up the spirits of those doing the frontline work is absolutely my calling.
Amazing. And so what's next for you? More of the same? Would you have another book in the works? You're expanding your consulting? Tell me what's going on.
Whew. Yes. So Changemaker Camp that I mentioned earlier is a new offering that I'm going to launch this summer. And so I've got a location up in the Pacific Northwest.
Nice.
For those listening, I'm looking for 4 funders to put forward 3 or 4 nonprofit CEOs that could use a break. I'm sure they all have a portfolio full of leaders that could use a little time away.
Hands will go up when they ask. Yes.
Right? So that's going to be a first-time offering that I've got a location that I'm starting there up in the San Juan Islands. And then I've got other sites. I've got an opportunity for a place in San Francisco, one in actually Kennebunkport, Maine, and then one down in Panama. So like I'm looking to build up that practice. I'm also I like the client work, like the board development delight that I was describing. I'm looking to do more of that. And that can be like monthly consulting work, and can also be, a 3-day retreat and getaway with a board or else. And, Bill, it's okay. So I think I mentioned earlier, I'm a runner, and I've run 7 marathons, over the last 45 years since I started running. I can't run nearly as much, it's just hard when you've been on planet this long.
Yes.
But I brought that up because I'm thinking, do I have one more marathon in me? I think I might. And then I wonder, do I have another book in me? I've only written one, and I know a lot of people are a lot more prolific. So I think there's probably some written version of what I've learned and what I'm experiencing doing the PlayFull podcast. It is unanimous. And you were talking about how to measure success of a podcast. There's some joy metric that I know is moving through the work you're doing, the work I'm getting to do. And I wonder if there's a written version of that to share as well. And I want to, you and I know you do this, you do keynotes and speaking. I love to be up on stage. I love to share. I have a real knack for putting together like panels and amplifying the voice of others and getting them a place on stage. And I'm also interested in sharing more about, what I've learned from this experience and how my spirits continue to be buoyed by this, and how I can, share that with others. And I usually bring ice cream to the audience. So that's always, it's kind of a supply chain challenge, but I'm up for it.
Yes. That's amazing. Kristine Michie, I am so glad your husband listened to Guy Kawasaki and for whatever reason thought we should connect, because I loved being on your show. I still have one of the pints you sent me that it's been on my mind this whole time. I've been very disciplined. I thank you for the work you're doing, and particularly for spending the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, what a complete delight and thrill and joy. Thank you so much, and love what you're doing, and let's just keep lifting each other up.
Right back at you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristine's PlayFull podcast really is a lot of fun. And truly, about halfway through, there's a pause. And as a guest, you run to your freezer, grab a pint of ice cream that your host has sent through the mail, kept frozen by the miracle of dry ice, and you eat while being interviewed through the next segment. It is PlayFull. Double L, indeed. Be sure to check out her show and her terrific guests, present company excluded, whenever you get the chance. I hope you enjoyed this Blue Sky conversation with Kristine Michie. Before you go, please consider leaving us a rating or review. These help us bring attention to the show, and your feedback gives us ideas for how we might make our presentations better. This and all episodes of Blue Sky are made possible by the skilled editing and mixing of the great crew at Sound On, Sound Off. To learn more about them, check out soundonsoundoff.com. And Crush Graphics is responsible for all graphics and cover art for Blue Sky and the Optimism Institute. That's Crush with a K, and you can find them at crushgraphics.com. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke, and I thank you for listening.